Cool. Well, welcome to Creating Organic Buzz in a Socially Distant World. Today we'll be discussing how artists have had to adapt in a post-COVID world as we've shifted from creating buzz and fan engagement from the road to doing basically all of it from home. So while our artists have faced a number of challenges, this time has also presented new ways to connect with fans more authentically than ever before. Our speakers will discuss concrete ways that artists can organically tell their stories and grow their audiences in a socially distant setting. We'll walk through the recent innovations and findings in tech and digital marketing to take music releases to a new level in 2021 and beyond. So now I'll introduce our panel. Mike Baldo is the founder of Wayward, a creative studio that designs interactive digital experiences. Francesca Caldara is North American label manager at Unified Music Group, working across multiple label brands, including UNFD. Amanda Matson is on the music label partnerships team at Facebook. And my name is Jennifer Schwartz. I'm on the digital marketing team at The Orchard, a division of Sony Music, where I help artists build an engaged online following and generate engagement and awareness for upcoming releases. Great, so kind of to intro our subject matter, let's start by hopping into kind of a figurative time machine and remembering what March 2020 was like. So if you remember, at that time, many of our artists were either gearing up for new releases or on the road, touring around a new release, kind of business as usual. And when COVID-19 hit, those artists had to cancel shows, go back home, and rely 100% on their smartphones and social media to connect with their fan bases. So my first question is for Francesca. What challenges did you experience at the beginning of COVID-19 as your artists went from the road to try and replicate that excitement and engagement online?
Yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, a bunch of our artists were on the road, particularly in the genre that I work in, with largely rock alternative music. Touring was not only the largest marketing driver, but one of the biggest moments on a release campaign, and not to mention like a source of income for the artist. So with that off the table for the foreseeable future, we just saw artists scrambling to find a way to stay connected with fans. And one of the easiest ones was Instagram and Facebook, people jumping on live right away, just because they kind of already had a following there. It was easy to use, and some of them had used it before. But yeah, that was the one that kind of had the most immediate and largest reach.
And as your artists started to kind of get more used to doing the whole fan engagement thing from home, did you find that they were pivoting their strategy, and were you pivoting your strategy for your artists?
Yeah, so in the beginning, it was sort of like just the acoustic performance from your living room. And then over time, it started to shift to sharing a more personal side and sharing their interests that are outside of music. So we saw people doing sort of cooking shows with an accompanying playlist, or playing games, video games, something that they were already doing in their spare time. And then we saw artists like In Heart's Wake, who released a very eco-friendly album. They are based in Australia, where the restrictions were a little bit lighter than here in the US, and they held events like tree planting with fans. While they couldn't do shows, they did other things that kind of tied into the record and things that they were passionate about. And then we saw other artists who held off on the live streams until they could find a way to kind of up the production value, and get the most, give fans the most bang for their buck. So Silverstein had just released their album on March 6th, and they had to pull off the road on the 13th from their biggest US headline tour to date. So they went home and they planned to record a performance at the studio that they had just recorded that album at, as a way to kind of tie in a live performance in your living room, but also promote the new record.
Definitely. Yeah, live streams were definitely that like first shift that I feel like we all felt around the world. And from the Orchard side, we create obviously social media strategy for a huge variety of artists. And some were really hesitant to go live in February 2020. And then suddenly in March 2020, because that unedited kind of real-time connection was only available online, they suddenly started going live. So one example from our Orchard side, I work with an artist called Lovely the Band, and they began a series every single Monday called Live with Lovely. So like you were mentioning, Francesca, they cooked with fans, they played fan requested songs that they couldn't play on the tour anymore. They even invited fans on one-on-one to ask questions. So that level of closeness would only have been possible before if you like met the band at a meet and greet. So that was pretty cool, and fans definitely embraced that. And Amanda, from the Facebook and Instagram side, did you see this wave of new demand? And if so, how did you guys kind of react to it and meet that new demand?
Yes, absolutely. So, Live was already a feature that was widely available, and widely used. But with COVID, we definitely saw an evolved interest into live streaming for both Facebook and Instagram. And so, like Francesca and you both mentioned, the challenge really was not having that in-person live performance opportunity that everyone was so used to. And that led to a lot of really creative digital uses on the platform to just really fill that gap and that connection with fans, or to make that connection with fans. So it's been amazing to see across Facebook Live and Instagram Live. There are more than 800 million daily active users, and since we launched Live on Facebook, it's actually people have made over 10 billion live broadcasts. So it is, really we see the impact there, we see the need for it, and we see people really leaning into that area.
That's huge. Those numbers are huge. As you've realized that this demand kind of wasn't going anywhere anytime soon, how did you guys wind up pivoting after that first round of a burst of IG Lives?
Definitely. So everything that that we do in music is really about community building and like connection for the artists, writers, and fans. So when we saw what was happening in the world and the artists pivoting and all of that, we at Facebook and Instagram reprioritized the timing of a lot of the different product launches that we'd already maybe had on the roadmap, but we had to think about leaning into the products and features that would really help musicians and creators during this time when everyone was apart. So there were definitely some examples of that. We started taking the IG Live and saving that to IGTV rather than just stories to really help with the promotion of engagement after a live ended. We also saw, Live with on Instagram being so huge. We saw a need for that on Facebook as well, so brought Live with back so that people can go live with another account on Facebook as well, and then also improved and expanded Live Producer for people who are producing live streams on Facebook. We also saw a lot of changes around ways to try to help with, revenue sources and things like that. So with artists in time of need, we were looking for opportunities for them. So we've been expanding on the Facebook stars and IG badges, which are an ability to tip during a live stream. So a user can, or a fan can tip an artist during the live. So we've been working to try to make that available to more people. And then also focusing on Facebook Shops and launching that and expanding so that there's an opportunity for artists to have potentially their merch on there, to focus on products that they're working with. So lots of different things. There also, of course, I'm sure we'll get into this more later, but on the Messenger Room side, there was just a launch there where now there can be 50 people together. There's this kind of intimate setting that you can create, and with the launch of that, we saw a lot of people leaning into Messenger Rooms and kind of connecting in that way, and also doing co-watching in Messenger and all of that. So lots of different things that were pivoted to really make sure that we were helping with the needs during this time.
Wow, that is a lot of new opportunities that came about as a result of like this new necessity in 2020. And from the Orchard side, I think that when our artists were able to tour, it was easier to kind of just promote a release the same way that we were used to, and kind of just say that we would use these new technologies and new features kind of in the future sometime. but 2020 like created a necessity for us to explore these new avenues. So Mike, as the owner of a creative studio, I'm curious if you saw any increased demand from clients that were finally ready to use tech and creative new ways to market a release now that everything was kind of moved online.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think you put it perfectly by saying it became sort of a necessity, you know, because we'd been doing interactive like music campaigns even before COVID as well. But I feel like once that moment happened, there's just a huge shift in priority and focus for the artists and labels that we were working with, where you know, usually where we come in on the design or the visual or interactive side is not always top of mind on the campaign. It usually comes down later in the stream. But for this, it became one of the only outlets really to focus on digital. So it definitely became a necessity. So yeah, that was definitely a shift from the client side that we saw. But I think a lot of them really embraced it. I think it gave them a chance to almost force them out of their comfort zone and try different things in their campaigns and really get interactive and visual with it. And then from our side, I think it was important for us to also keep music central to those campaigns too. So putting audio directly in these experiences on digital, even though they can't be there physically, having music streaming and being a part of that experience was hugely important to us and for the client and fan experience. So yeah, I think that shift kind of started as a necessity, but now that you know, artists and labels have been doing these kind of experimental campaigns for about a year now, I think they've kind of seen the value in it, and I think it will be kind of a you know, a major priority and a major part of these campaigns moving forward, even post-COVID. So it's been an interesting kind of shift in the thought and planning process.
Definitely. Amanda, did you see kind of the same thing on your end in terms of increased demand for creative uses of these new features to promote a release?
Totally. So we've always said, and something we've kind of always said from the beginning, I guess, is that that time in between individual releases is really important because you can still engage with your audience during that time in a way that feels really authentic. And it doesn't even have to be related to music. So with this shift, I think we saw a lot more people really realizing that and also focusing on other interests, even things that weren't music, things that fans really wanted to see. Because fans want to see what the artist really thinks is interesting or funny or inspiring. There are just opportunities there to really kind of, you know, show authentic interests to your fans. And so in this time when we were really forced apart, it became, I think, truer than ever for artists to connect with fans in that way.
Absolutely. Yeah, speaking from our side at the Orchard, I actually worked with Francesca on a few really fun creative campaigns this year. One recent one was for a metal band called Era, where we developed a website that allowed fans to decode binary coded messages into links like YouTube teasers and ultimately a blind LP that wound up selling out in a few hours. So the band announced each day just one clue on socials and drove fans to the website where they could type in the code and unlock the day's content. So that was kind of a fun online engaging way to kind of get fans jazzed about this upcoming record that you know, allowed us to get a little creative with the fan base and engage them in a new way. Cool. So we've touched on the shift in marketing to kind of more intimate, unedited, and sort of creative mediums. But I think we also saw a really clear shift in the content and the copy of what our artists were sharing in this sort of huge collective experience that was quarantine. So Amanda, since you work with artists who have been starting real conversations every day on your platforms, sharing their real stances, how did you see artists rise to the occasion and share in a more intimate and direct way in 2020?
We see a lot of artists that are highlighting the real conversations, like you said, that are, you know, highlighting outside talents, but also, you know, leaning into things like daily meditation series or, you know, acoustic jams, like a coffee chat every day, having a series every day that they can go to kind of connect with fans. Also, the interesting thing about this, like you mentioned, is also this content doesn't necessarily have to be that high quality production, although that is also wonderful. But there are these ways to kind of engage with fans in this other way, and it's something really special about listening to an artist live set from their living room, or just doing a Q&A from the garden. These moments are really important, and then I think that also with that, there's this opportunity to just create super fans from it, because it is so intimate in a way, where you can jump into the comments, do a shout out, you're right there with them in this digital space. And I think that's an opportunity to help make people feel less distant, and just have those kinds of connections, those personal connections, even though we're in this digital world, to still find those moments to connect in an authentic way.
That's a great point. And Francesca, from the label side, did you also kind of feel a shift in how your artists were engaging with fans? And if so, how did they connect in more authentic, intimate ways?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, like you mentioned, that Era website was something brand new for the band. They hadn't really done something that fans could kind of sink their teeth into so early in a campaign, like before announcing the record. But we've also seen a bunch of artists trying out new platforms like Twitch as a means to stay regularly connected with fans. So Silverstein stream every Monday. They've also, up until recently, they just started a Discord as a means to stay connected with fans, and communicate with them regularly. They've also, most recently on Twitch, written a song live. So they never really let fans into that songwriting process. And they did a stream where they, well, a series of streams where they were actually writing the song live on Twitch, taking lyric and melody input, bringing fans in on the stream on video to kind of like sing what their idea was. And yeah, it's a song that hopefully will be on the next record, and it'll be a cool story to tell.
That's amazing. I think that's an incredible example of how tech has also definitely contributed to that added feeling of intimacy. And I think we've seen a lot of interactive experiences that have brought fans closer to their favorite artist, despite not actually being physically closer. So Mike, what have you seen in terms of tech bridging the gap between fan and artist, or fan and fan? Like, now that we're not in the same room together, but still connecting virtually from home.
Yeah, so I think that's like the thing that was missed most for fans when all of this changed. I think that connection was the biggest missing piece. When fans would be able to go out and see a live show or whatever, they'd be connecting with the artists themselves, with other fans, the environment, just being somewhere different and really like getting involved, I think was the biggest missing piece. And I think interestingly, that's kind of where tech could sort of help fill those gaps. I think on our side, we saw a lot of good uses of 3D AR, chat, things that almost kind of simulate that real world experience, and sort of blurring the lines between tech and in-person physical experiences. Those helped kind of bring people together. So whether it was a digital space really like designed specifically to the artist or to the album or themes of the music, kind of helped fans experience that, not just by listening, but also visually kind of getting a sense of exploration and kind of getting into these interactive spaces, and getting a sense that they were connecting on a deeper level than they previously were able to, and they couldn't do so in person.
Awesome. Have you seen any like particular examples that have excited you and are really good examples for others to look at?
Yeah, for sure. So I think there's a couple different kind of approaches. I think the one that we saw early on was interactive games, and sort of like incorporating audio and streaming with those types of experiences. So we did a campaign with The Orchard, actually, and an artist called Kara Marnie, who had a music video that was animated, which seemed to be a perfect fit for a retro like pixel art style game. So we built out this game where fans could play, but during the whole experience, they're listening to the new music as well. So it kind of gets them involved in the whole theme of the music by hearing that as they're playing. But I think the piece that we saw really take off, especially in the past year or so, was sharing. So they would compete with friends, trying to get a high score. The artist also was very involved. She would share fan high scores or stories or Instagram. So it really kind of made this a community thing when they couldn't connect otherwise. So it helped bring people together that way in a fun sort of competitive manner. On the other side, I think something more like experiential is a campaign we just wrapped up with a band called Black Pistol Fire, who we essentially designed a 3D interactive space that helped us kind of roll out content throughout the campaign. So that was another challenge we were trying to solve with this particular project, was that usually the digital or visual side of these music campaigns are pretty transient. They're, it's a landing page or some other design that lasts as long as the announcement does. But what we tried to do with this was to create a space where fans could actually wander around and sort of uncover content throughout. So we rolled this out every week, sort of had a new piece of the experience open up. So fans could go into a 3D record store, for example, and look at vinyl and sort of flip it around front and back, look at the actual designs and preview audio for the new records. So as new singles were coming out, we would roll out spaces where fans could explore those new singles. They could hop into a merch store and get exclusive t-shirts that weren't available anywhere else. So it really made fans kind of feel like they were a part of this experience. Even though they were physically isolated, they had this sense of exploration and connection with the music. I think having, pieces of the audio release and video kind of just brought in all of those different aspects and made it a little bit more fun for the artist and the fans to kind of like connect together there.
That's incredible. I mean, who doesn't miss going to record stores? So that's amazing.
Yeah, totally.
Amanda, from the Facebook and Instagram side, what exciting examples of kind of community building experiences have you seen?
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with what Mike was saying, that experience of, being in a record store, like being in person, is lacking right now. And so those moments when we can use tech to create those kinds of experiences are so meaningful at this time. So I've definitely seen similar things on the Facebook side, especially in this kind of, virtual reality space on Oculus, or even in Spark AR filters and effects, and integrating music into those, and just finding ways to kind of make people feel more connected and integrated through these kinds of digital spaces. One space that really stands out to with that is Messenger Rooms, because there are so many opportunities there for the artist fan to do a meet and greet, to kind of build that community, and they're pretty intimate, so they're up to 50 people. So it really gives you this, again, the opportunity for those kind of super fan experiences. And then, I've just seen so many interesting other things. Like, I think this is like a new renaissance or like a new time in music, where we just saw some of the coolest formats that we didn't expect evolve. Even just looking at like D-Nice's Club Quarantine, where it brought hundreds of thousands of people together into this live club experience. Everyone was missing that, that experience of going to a club. And so they were able to do that from the comfort of their home. But what was interesting with that was just how many different types of people were in that experience, and how much they were leaning in, like even political leaders. We saw, Michelle Obama jumping in there, and just with all these music fans. And there was just a sense of community in those moments, within that live experience. So we also saw artists leaning in, using different hashtags to kind of keep community, to stay together. The Together at Home hashtag was really useful in that, I think, and coming together. And we even saw Facebook groups being a really great space for people to build that community too. So we saw a quarantine sing-along group that was started, and there were actually a few of these that started up. And it was a great group. One of them in particular would kind of had a schedule where they would put out the new song that everyone could cover, and then people would upload their own videos, and they kind of did this sing-along moment together. So that, and then I have to touch on also, I think, the versus battles that have evolved on Instagram and just have been such a key example of that creativity, community building, just like a really fun and engaging format. But we see with that also not only fans leaning back and listening, but like really engaging and coming together in this kind of community, participating. So I think that's been my real takeaway with some of these new formats that have evolved, and also these, you know, ways that artists are using tech. It's really helpful in building that community. There are some creative ways that they've done that. So I've just been super impressed to see how creative artists and managers and labels are with everything, and how much the fans are really leaning into it.
So fun. Francesca, haven't some unified artists used some Facebook group or Facebook rooms to kind of build community?
Yeah, it's funny. Amanda's mentioning all of the things that we're trying to take advantage of, and it's been cool to see fans really leaning into this, and bands leaning into this opportunity to get even closer while they're further apart. So last fall, In Hearts Wake started a Facebook group for their fans called Hellbringers, which is the title of one of their singles from the last record. And in there, they hold meme competitions, something that the fans were kind of already doing. But now they're rewarding fans for doing it, where they'll win, you know, a copy of the record or merch. They've done a series of live chats with the fans, live Q&As on Facebook, and they also utilized Facebook rooms to kind of play unreleased music for their top 50 fans.
Awesome. Oh my gosh, I love to hear it.
That's so fun as a super fan.
Yeah.
So let's kind of continue to jam on the new tech and features that are available to artists in 2021, and maybe we'll touch on some fun use cases because I know there are so many more. So one example, touching back on Spark AR, which Amanda was talking about a little bit. So in 2020, our design team at The Orchard built over 80 Instagram augmented reality filters, which is wild to me because in 2019, we had no augmented reality experience as a team. So we saw this opportunity when it launched for everyone, and we kind of just ran with it and just taught ourselves. So two examples I want to highlight are projects I actually worked with Francesca again. So two of them were for Silverstein, and these were in the early days of the Spark AR coming out. So the first one immersed fans in the band's album art, which was a pretty recognizable purple infinity mirror. That was really fun because you got to be inside the album art. The second one was kind of right when those randomizer filters began to start trending, you know, the ones that tell you what Disney princess you are or what breakfast food you are. So because Silverstein's 20th anniversary tour was cut short with the pandemic, we made like a 20th anniversary filter, and fans could find out which Silverstein album they were. And the first one I think had some really especially intriguing stats. So 135% of the band's audience actually saw it, which basically means that the entire fan base and then some of their friends saw it. So I'd say that was pretty effective at creating organic exposure for the band. So kind of following up on the Spark AR and all of that, Amanda, what are some features and strategies that are available to artists in 2021, kind of like IG filters? And do you see the benefit in being a first mover, kind of testing these things before you feel fully ready, kind of like we did?
Totally. I love to hear those examples of, you know, really leaning into some of the newer products and taking some of those risks, because I think that there is an opportunity and a payoff to jumping in and taking risks within your comfortability, of course, like when it's authentic to what you're trying to do, and within what an artist's strategy is, of course. But we have a lot of opportunities that I'm seeing that with, especially with the expansion of Reels on Instagram. I see that there are so many artists who are really getting creative there. The product is kind of, you know, since it's a little bit newer, there's like a real virality of that organic native content, and it's a little bit more common. So I actually saw an Orchard, the Orchard artist Blue de Tiger doing a great job of this as a developing artist, really leaning into Reels and connecting with fans to really build that new audience and to grow. So she's been leaning in as just doing an amazing job with like these creative bass covers and accompaniments in Reels, posting some behind the scenes of when she's creating content. And then, you know, she's also jumping into challenges and trends and just like leaning in really early. And I think it's really paid off. She's also, you know, like you were saying with Spark AR, put out a filter for her Figure It Out release. And then using music stickers and stories to really, you know, reshare those that fans use and to highlight her own music within stories too. And just, you know, posting great highlights and everything like that to her feed. So I think from that, you can see some really impressive results when you look at the data of how that can help build a fan base. So her interaction rate is on Instagram, it's over 13%, which is really good, and that's been hugely impactful because I think she's seen over 300% increase in followers over just the last 6 months. And on Facebook, then there's also this benefit in cross-posting to Facebook, or you know, having some of that content interplay with Facebook, because she saw a similar thing interacting at a little bit lower rate, around 5% or so, but still seeing that 75% follower increase. So there's kind of that halo effect as well that can happen. And so that's a great example. I would say, you know, one artist in particular who had, but so many others are also doing this, really jumping into some of those new features, new products to, you know, take a few risks. And I think you see that pay off, and especially with the interaction and really engaging with fans too within that. You know, it's really great to see that audience development that comes from that.
Absolutely. Mike and Francesca, what's your take on kind of being a first mover? Are there any features that you've seen artists really successfully be first movers in, or what's your take?
Yeah, I think from my end, again, I think keeping music centered to the experience is super important to the artist, and I think there's a lot of opportunity, especially now with a lot of the streaming APIs that are accessible, and I think there can be some really exciting creative ideas and uses for those as well. Mainly because it's kind of making that process seamless, where fans can listen, but they're also listening directly through the streaming service. So Spotify, Apple Music, Tidal, for example, the artist benefits by getting those actual streams count towards their numbers, and the fan gets sort of a seamless integrated experience rather than just like an embedded player or something that's part of that interaction. So I think there's a lot of potential for that, and I'd definitely be curious to see how artists leverage that in the future.
Yeah, I don't disagree that there's a huge benefit to kind of being one of the first movers and taking the chance here, just because there's less competition in the space when you are early. But I do think that we've seen a greater impact in terms of like if there's consistency, but also if there's authenticity. So if it kind of is cohesive with the rest of the album campaign or the band's like overall aesthetic and brand.
That's a really important point, that it has to be a right fit for the artist, and not everything is going to be a right fit for every artist. So solid point. Moving on to one of my favorite nerdy subjects as a marketer, data. I want to take a little data point from eMarketer, from a survey that was taken early in the pandemic that found that between 46% and 51% of US adults were using social media more since COVID-19. That number was actually even higher for 18 to 34-year-olds, it was 60%, and for 35 to 49-year-olds, that was 64%. So I think one of the silver linings here is that with more people on social media, more people engaging with our content, we're able to collect more data on what our fans like and what they don't like, kind of than ever before. And while data can seem kind of intimidating to artists, I once heard it explained this great way that when you play a show and you look out at the audience, you naturally kind of scan for whether your audience is into the show. So if you see them singing along to every word, that's data, and it's telling you that the audience loves the song. Or if you see them standing still with their arms crossed, that's also data, but it's probably telling you that it's not a fan favorite. And if you're smart, you'll probably adjust your set list based on that data. So digitally, one of the equivalents of that live fan feedback is in the back end of our social media accounts, where you can see how your posts are performing, you can see how fans are engaging with your content, and if we're smart, we'll tailor our future strategies based on how that past content has performed. So Amanda, since I just touched on the back end of our social media and the stats it provides us, what role have you seen data play in the campaigns that you've watched over the past year? And do you think good data has been a silver lining?
Definitely. I think that data has always been, like you said, the key to understanding a real success. So that has been and continues to be a big focus. In Insights or Creator Studio or CrowdTangle, we really aim to give artists things that will help them, data that will help them understand where their audiences are, what's performing best, how to build a fan base and kind of like what worked, and then how to recreate that. So it definitely is a huge focus, and something that I would strongly encourage everyone, every artist to really focus on. Like you said, we don't have that live feedback, and so having the digital feedback is really important, and you get so much information from those numbers. Absolutely.
And are there any specific data points that you would recommend that artists pay attention to, or just everything?
Yeah, I think that some of the key pieces I would suggest is really looking at what's overperforming and underperforming. You can see that, especially if you're looking into CrowdTangle or into the Creator Studio, you can see what's performing comparatively. But then also, I think, like I mentioned sort of with Blue to Tiger as well, the engagement rate or the interaction rate and how that interaction leads to the performance of specific content, and then potentially to follower growth. I think that is a key thing to keep an eye on, is really like, how is your engagement or interaction frequency of posts, things like that, how is that leading to more content that your fans like, and then to more eyeballs on that content. So kind of a combination of those two things, the frequency and then what's doing well and what isn't comparatively, to really get an understanding of what your fans want to see.
Great. Francesca and Mike, from your sides, is there any specific data point that you pay attention to?
Yeah.
I love your example of the analytics side. Jen, you were talking about like a band seeing, what songs fans are most engaged with. I love that, because I feel like that's such a good indicator, especially early in a campaign, as you're leading up to release, and eventually someday again tours and things like that, where if you can kind of track which songs fans are listening to most, especially if it's just the early singles, you can kind of get a sense of what they'll engage with most for the rest of the record, or how many people pre-saved, how many people listen to just a portion of a song versus all of it, which streaming services they favored. All of that kind of interaction, I think, is really important throughout the campaign to figure out next steps and how it'll progress and how you engage with that audience moving forward.
Yeah, similar to what Mike and Amanda have been saying, we have been taking a look at sort of the insights and the data in terms of social posts, particularly the back end of like Facebook pages, those insights that Amanda was touching on. It can kind of inform what types of posts are yielding the most impressions and interactions. So pre-pandemic, we saw that videos were the most effective and kind of getting the most likes and comments and views. But more recently, photos, and in particular, throwback photos of our artists at concerts and performing at festivals, have taken over. It's something that what we're seeing people commenting like, oh, I was there, or wish, can't wait to see them in the future. And so that utilizing that data to kind of inform our strategy going forward, I think is the key.
Absolutely. And as we start to focus more and more on data from home, Amanda, what can you tell us about creating content for the algorithm, if you can tell us anything? And are there any like best practices or tips and tricks that you can kind of clue us in on?
Yeah, I will say, you know, a lot of our world is algorithmic, so I know that is often an opportunity, but also can be a challenge. But I think that, and I know I touched on this in the data points as well, but that consistent engagement is really powerful. And I think when you're thinking about algorithms, especially, you know, and there are just so many ways to connect with fans across Facebook and Instagram. And when you're, you know, planning a campaign about artists, I think it's really about leaning in to all or select features that really feel right for them, and then, you know, doing that on a more consistent basis as well. So balancing the authenticity and the consistency of posting and interacting. I think also, you know, there's with each of the different features available, at least on the Facebook and Instagram side, there are a lot of different opportunities for artists. So the feed, you know, on Facebook and Instagram can really be a place to highlight the personal brand. So that's a, you know, a place that you have your highlights, and then you've got your stories for those kind of like authentic view into the day-to-day everyday life, and then music stickers can kind of amplify that and create a mood around that. So that's another avenue that artists then have to lean into. And then they have IGTV for kind of longer storytelling, you know, and going really deep with the audience. And then of course we touched on a lot, but live then is for really real-time interaction. And now with Reels, you've got this kind of entertaining, lightweight, potentially trending moments opportunity where it's a little bit less connected. You have the opportunity to potentially expand your fan group to a new audience. And so it doesn't necessarily have to be as produced and edited as something maybe that that you might be doing to highlight other releases or content in the feed. So I think really, you know, leaning into the things that feel authentic for an artist within all those opportunities, and then keeping that consistency. I think that the anything algorithmic then is going to really work in your favor in some way. And so that would be, I guess, my advice for any artist is just do what feels right for you, which of those things really work for you, but then try to do those in a consistent way and really lean in with fans and build that connection.
I think that's a great way to tie it together. Figure out what works for you and just keep doing it. So now that we've covered data and how we're all going to be using that to create better content in 2021, I'm sure, let's kind of touch on moving forward what our new normal looks like, so to say. Obviously, this collective experience has shifted our industry in a way that we probably won't be coming back from, and there are good and bad pieces to that. I think one highlight that's come from working with our artists at the Orchard during this time is just sharing more transparently. We've seen a lot of our artists kind of engage with social causes. Spotify has now allowed artists like Diet Sig to feature their favorite charities on their Spotify profiles. We've seen artists like Seawolf on Dangerbird play shows on Facebook Live that benefited charity or that benefited different local venues, trying to keep them afloat. And I think that's a particularly promising thing that I'm seeing out of 2020. So I want to kind of ask you guys as well what you think the new normal looks like and how a marketing plan looks like for you now. Whether it's going to be more interactive or more transparent, a lot of the things that we've talked about probably apply here. So Amanda, I'll ask you first. What do you think marketing for artists will look like in 2021 as the new normal?
Yeah, the new normal. Oh, we're still doing doing this world, but I think we'll see a continued investment in some of these tools and features that artists and fans can use to stay connected. To me, it doesn't seem that, like, thankfully, it doesn't seem like content or music creation has really slowed. And if anything, I think it's increasing, and there's more opportunity with, you know, some really new formats and fun ways to build out music and to create distantly. So I expect that to continue. I also think that there is a continued focus on how to improve the revenue sources for some of that digitally. So I think that will continue to be a focus as well. And in terms of marketing for artists, I know that always has to kind of be weighed in as well. And how do we help artists on the platform? Yeah, those are kind of the key things that I think. But I expect that I think a lot of that that music and content creation will continue, these new formats and the different things that we're seeing. The creativity is there and continuing and growing. So it's really impressive to see.
And Francesca, from your side, what's the new normal looking like?
Yeah, I mean, we kind of touched on it at the beginning, that we saw a lot of artists trying new things and doing new things online out of necessity. I'm really hoping that the new normal includes artists continuing with that and taking advantage of these platforms. We saw artists jumping on Twitch or TikTok for the first time, or doing things like vlogs, or we mentioned that Era built that interactive website for the first time. Doing things like that, I'm really hoping that that's part of the new normal. I think these were all things that were available to us pre-pandemic, and they're going to continue to be available. But as we mentioned, also, like, cohesiveness and consistency is the key. So don't just post once on TikTok and hope that and say that that's part of our marketing plan now. I think sticking with it and utilizing that data to kind of inform your strategy going forward, as we said.
Mike, how about you?
Yeah, I think, I mean, I definitely see there being a lot more creative uses for this new tech, for sure. I think what's going to be interesting too, as hopefully, things slowly begin going back to normal, I think it's going to be interesting to watch the shift in, fan interest and how they engage too, because I think being so tied digitally for the past year, more so I think than ever, has been good in a lot of ways. But I think also at a certain point, there's a bit of that screen fatigue that'll start to happen, where fans will need to kind of have some sense of bridging the gap between that digital and physical space. So I really think there's going to be a huge opportunity again for things like AR, or somehow tying that digital campaign to something tangible in the physical space. Even if shows don't happen, maybe it's like scanning poster art around your city or something like that, where there could be a lot of ways to bring those two together. And I think digital will for sure continue to be a huge priority. And I think the really creative uses of that are going to be where that touches the physical space in real world.
I love that to kind of cap things off.
Mm-hmm. Totally agree with the hybrid of live performances too. I just miss them so much. And I think being able to have that hybrid of the digital space and hopefully slowly going back into the live performance space will be a huge part for us, for those in-person live shows, meeting the digital space, and the fans having the opportunity for both and whatever feels comfortable too.
Yeah, I can't wait to see how the two kind of come together once we're all able to go to shows again. Fantastic. Well, that concludes creating organic buzz in a socially distant world. To kind of sum things up, we've covered how COVID-19 has impacted the way our artists approach marketing release, and what this sort of like new normal looks like in 2021 and beyond. And it seems like it's equal parts vulnerable and raw content, early movement in playing with new technology, and responding to our data to better understand our audience and what they want. This year has brought with it its fair share of challenges, like we've kind of talked about this whole time, but also some silver linings that artists and their teams can take advantage of in the next year. So we want to thank you for attending, and we look forward to seeing what campaigns you guys create in 2021.